Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Halal Gap. I'm your co-host, Skandar Theek, and as always, I'm joined by...
Your other co-host, Sophia Alani. And of course, the most interesting man on the planet, Asif, where you at?
Sup?
Woo,
Interesting.
so interesting, the way he said sup. If you guys have enjoyed our episodes of the Halal Gap so far and want to make sure not to miss the next one, please follow us on Apple and Spotify and leave us a review. If you're watching this on YouTube, please like and subscribe to our channel. We have an incredible guest joining us today. She is, drum roll please. That's a pretty good drum roll. She is our first officially announced guest for our event that is happening on March 12th, 2022. Yes, just yesterday in real time, but 2 weeks ago in your time, we announced that our event is going to be happening on March 12th, 2022. We are so excited for our guest today, who will be one of our featured performers. Unfortunately, I was not able to take part in this conversation, but she had an incredible one with Sophia. So Sophia, please take it away.
She is a comedian, actress, and writer who you've seen on Last Comic Standing, Late Night with Seth Meyers, Netflix's 100 Humans, and as Aleesha on Amazon Prime's Upload. She also hosts her very own podcast, Honest Tea with Z, where she shares some facts and a whole lot of opinions. Joining us all the way from LA, please welcome Zainab Johnson.
Woo! Hello.
Thank you so much for joining us today.
Oh, thanks for having me.
We're very, very excited. I had a few of our Mosquers team members had the pleasure of seeing you at I Heart Halal, doing your set at the comedy night there in 2019. And I think we've all been huge fans ever since. And so very exciting to be able to share this conversation with our Mosquers followers and listeners and everything. But basically how we usually go is we just kind of start right from the beginning. So your origin story, kind of if you want to talk about your life, your journey.
Let's see, at the beginning, I was born in Brooklyn. My parents moved to Harlem when I was very young. So I grew up in New York City, Harlem specifically. And, I'm one of 13, which I think is a major part of my story, because I do think that I had to acquire certain social skills, that people normally have to go out into the world to receive. But it's like I'm constantly faced with it the moment I wake up to the moment I go to sleep within my house, Yeah, and I grew up in New York, and then after college, I moved to LA, and I moved to LA in the pursuit of, I don't know, like a dream, although I wasn't sure what that dream was, but I also didn't want to. I think as much as I didn't know what the dream was, I knew that I didn't want to regret anything. I knew that, you know, uh, time was of the essence, and whatever gut feeling I had to go, I should follow it. And so I moved to LA, not really knowing like anything, like thinking like, I guess I'm going to be on TV, we'll figure out how to do that. And then my journey in LA led me to comedy. I mean, I've always loved comedy, but it led me specifically to stand-up comedy, like getting on stage. And yeah, and now I'm sitting here talking to you.
So thank you. So with that initial kind of talking about how being part of such a big family gave you these social skills, like what kind of social skills? Was it like the kind of extroverted, like being funny and like getting attention that way kind of skill, or more so like just dealing well with like large groups of people, or like what kind of social skills did that help you develop?
So I think that it's both. I think that I'm not only one of 13, but I am one of the middle children. And so I think definitely there's a certain level of independence that you develop. There's a certain level of sharing that you develop in a sharing of space, a sharing of privacy, a sharing of emotion, a sharing of thought, a sharing of like understanding that it ain't even about you, you know?
Mhm.
And I don't know, like I think a lot of people think that Yeah, that's why you're funny, because you were like one of 13. Like, you had to be funny. How else is one to stand out, you know,
Mhm.
amongst such a large sibling group? But
Mhm.
um I mean, I was also very smart. So that's a way to
Mhm.
stand out, you know. I was really good at athletic. Like, it's rare that I'm not good at something, you know.
Mhm. Nice.
So if I like want to learn it, I mean, like, no, I can't sing. So, and I have siblings. Like, I have a sister who can like sing, and that's
Mhm.
wonderful. But I think a lot of people uh come to the conclusion, like, yeah, that's how you got funny, because you were in such a large family. But it's like, I don't
Mhm.
ever remember being funny growing up.
No?
I don't remember like feeling like I was a funny person. I remember appreciating funny things. I remember loving to watch comedies, whether it be on TV, movies, or stand-up specials. I remember those experiences, but I don't
Mhm.
remember being the person that was making people laugh. And it's really interesting because I get so many messages via social media from people who like went to school with me or like grew up in the same neighborhood as me, and they're like, you were always funny. And I'm like, when? I don't even remember, like, I don't even remember like really an interaction with you, so
Mhm.
how could you have known I was funny? I remember one of my younger brothers. He's This particular brother is 8 years younger than me.
Mhm.
And my mom and a few of my siblings, they drove down to, I was doing a stand up taping in Atlanta, Georgia years ago. It was like one of my first ever TV sets. And my mom and some of my siblings drove down to come and be in the audience and watch me do this set. And afterward, my younger brother, he was like, Zainab, I was so scared. And I was like, really? Why? He was like, I don't know. It's like, I was so nervous. He was like, it was the most scared and nervous I had ever felt in my life. And I'm like, in your life? And he was like, in my life. And I was like, why? He was like, because I don't ever remember you being funny. So like, he was like, so when I was sitting in that audience, like when they announced your name as you were walking out,
Mhm.
and it was like a long walk out, like a runway walk out. He was like, as you were walking, he was like, I literally could have like used the bathroom on myself. That's
Oh
how
my
afraid I
god.
was.
Oh, wow.
And I was like, really? He was like, yeah, I just don't remember you being funny. He said, but then the first sentence you said, it was so funny. And then everybody
Mhm.
laughed. And he was like, and then I just relaxed. And I was like, oh
Mhm.
shoot, my sister is funny, And
Mhm.
I never forget that story. Like, that was probably like 7 years ago at this point. And I never forget that story. I just think
Mhm.
I think that is so funny.
Yeah, yeah. So, like, did you have a sibling that was, like, the funny one? Or, like, it was just that was not a characteristic that anybody had, and you were all kinda hilarious?
Yeah, like, I don't ever remember a sibling telling me a joke, you know?
Mhm.
I remember like funny moments happening, but not a result of someone trying to be funny,
Mm,
you
mhm.
know? Like, I
Yeah.
remember we were like pranksters. Like, I remember we got in trouble really bad. My older brother was babysitting us. My oldest brother, who's 4 years older than me, he was babysitting us. And we lived on the fourth floor at that time in New York. And we decided that everybody walking on the street below us, we were going to empty out the contents in our refrigerator on everybody walking out.
Oh my
And
god.
so as people are walking down the street trying to get wherever they're trying to go, we're just like dumping syrup and ketchup
Oh
and
my
like
god.
on people. And I remember as a kid thinking like it was so mischievous and so fun to do. You get what I'm saying? Like, just like bad kids. And so like,
Mhm.
yeah, we had fun moments like that. I remember, I mean, we got in trouble for that really bad, but I remember, like, I was the only sibling that was actually born at home. At this particular point in Brooklyn, there was, a lot of gun violence. And so when I decided to come into this world, there was a shootout on my block. And so
Oh my
the
goodness.
ambulance, the EMT workers, they couldn't get through. And so my mom ended up going to labor. and having me while she was on the toilet. Like she just went to the bathroom and I came, you know?
Oh, wow.
And I remember after that, so growing up as a kid, my oldest brother, again, he used to call me like the shitty baby because I was born on a toilet. And like that's
Right.
funny,
Yeah.
and so I guess like I remember stuff like that, but I don't remember any one of us like not growing up. Like now I can look at, and like as an adult I can point out the characteristics of my siblings, you know what I'm saying, the personality traits that are, like, but I don't really remember as a child or even as like a teenager like thinking like, or ever telling somebody like, oh, y'all got to hear my story, my brother is so funny or my sister is so
Mhm.
funny, like
Mhm.
now my nieces and nephews, even my brothers and sisters, they can actually tell somebody like, yo, my sister is so funny, here,
Mhm.
watch this joke. I don't remember being able to do that. But
Right.
apparently when I was in school, I had the best stories and I was so funny and I knew how to tell a story. I don't remember any of that.
No, that's so interesting.
No.
So do you
No.
think that it was a case of, like, it was just, like, something that came so naturally to you that you didn't even notice it? Or do you think it was a case of, like, it was something that was just so unfamiliar that you were like, "Well, let's tell this story, and if it lands, great, but if not, like, I don't really care."
I'm going to go with the first one. I think that maybe it was so natural to me that I didn't even realize that I was doing it because I don't ever recall telling a story in my youth with the intentions of being funny.
Mhm.
Like I don't ever, now I know when I'm telling, like, girl, I got this funny story to tell. I know when I'm about to give a gem, I know when it's
Mhm,
about to
mhm,
be an enjoyable experience for the listener. But
mhm.
I don't ever remember up until like about the age of like 20. I don't really remember ever talking to anyone with the intentions, like purposely, like being funny and it actually being funny, you know?
Right. Yeah, yeah, yeah. It wasn't an intentional thing. That's so
No.
interesting. So how then did comedy, like, come into your life? Like, I know you said you were very much a consumer of comedy, watching the movies and the specials and stuff, but, like, how is it something that you ended up realizing you liked or were good at or
Well, I mean, I always loved it. I do think that like there's something therapeutic in laughing. And so I think I always loved to laugh. And so the moment I kind of ventured out into the world on my own, like when I started like going out to nightclubs and things like that, I always, I don't know, I always went to comedy clubs first, you know, and I would watch, like nothing felt better. Like I was never, I was never like around a guy or at a club, a nightclub, or heard a song that made me feel like how a good joke makes you feel.
Mm,
Like so when
mhm,
somebody makes you laugh and laugh hard, it's like you want to share it with everybody else.
mhm, mhm,
And so I remember that feeling, although I never thought that I could I never, that didn't convert to, oh, Zainab, you can do that. But I definitely had an appreciation for it. And then I realized, like, oh, comics are people. So you can actually have these people in your personal life. Like that means
mhm,
you have like funny people and funny moments in your personal life. And that, so life will always be fun. That's what I,
mhm,
initially thought. You find out the comics can be really dark and like depressed and
mhm,
all of that. Um, but when I moved to LA, I remember like shortly after I got here, a friend of mine who is a comedian, a stand-up comedian and writer, he was like, "Hey, this show is looking for funny women. They're having a hard time finding funny women." And it's like, this seems to be what
mm,
people say all the time. I don't.
mhm.
But he was like, they're having a hard time finding funny women. And this is still at the point where I've never considered myself to be funny. And so I'm like, well, why are you calling me? And he was like, he was like, because you're funny. I was like, no, I'm not. And he was like, just go to the audition, please. I told them that I was going to send you to the audition. Just go. And so I go to the
Mm,
audition. I end up booking the show.
mhm,
And the show was like a lot of improv. Like it was a lot of like having to figure it out in the moment. And it ended up being like a funny show for, the viewers. And I think after that, I think that's what made me aware of like, oh, there is something that I know how to do. Like I remember being in Vegas with comedian friends of mine at like this, I don't know, like this like comedy taping. And I remember a really big comedy director, Stan Lathan. I remember he walked up to me. I had never done stand up before. I was essentially like, nobody knew me, knew who I was. And he walked up to me and he shook my hand and he said, I heard you have great comedic timing. And I was
Mm.
like, and like I was like, yeah, I do, but I didn't know if I did. But I was like, it was one of those fake it till you make it type moments. I was like, yeah, I do, and what?
Mm-hmm.
And then I don't know, maybe like 2 years after that, I started stand up.
Mm-hmm.
I found my way. I was working at a comedy club. I was not working at a comedy club, but I was working for someone who produced a show at a comedy club, one
Mm-hmm.
night a week. And it forced me to sort of like see the behind the scenes of like stand up comedy. And then the day I quit that job, I went and did an open mic near my house, and the
Mm-hmm.
rest is like history. Then I
Oh wow.
became, yeah, I became a stand up comedian. But I
Mm-hmm.
do remember that moment, and I never had this with anything else. I remember graduating from high school. I remember graduating from college. I remember like all of these things that I had accomplished. I remember like booking, my first commercial. I remember booking my first TV gig. I remember being asked, to walk in like different fashions. I remember so many things, but I'll never forget that one day at that open mic when I got off stage, I thought, oh, this is the thing.
Mm-hmm.
This is my thing. I
Mm-hmm.
even said it to my friend. I said, as soon as I got off stage and walked outside, I was like, oh my God, I think I'm good at this. and
That's
and
awesome.
because usually open mics are bad. Your first open mic, usually it's like terrible. I was like, I think that I'm good at this. And she was like, she looked at me and she literally said, these were her words. She said, yeah, bitch, I told you you're funny. I said, okay.
Everyone's like, yeah, we knew already. And you're like, hey, I just realized this amazing
Yeah.
thing nobody else knows. That's too funny. So going back, because I think there was a lot there that I'd like to kind of go into a little bit. But first, I want to say that like I know that you mentioned that you loved Eddie Murphy growing up, and like Coming to America was like one of your absolute favorite movies. And given that like that was like the caliber of comedy that you were watching, do you think that you didn't want to like it was harder for you to identify yourself as funny because like it was just like in comparison to Eddie Murphy when you like hadn't yet done a lot of comedy and stuff, like how could you be funny? Like Eddie Murphy is funny. Like do you think that played any
No.
part?
If it did, it's so deep in the subconscious that it's like, like I don't think so.
Mhm.
I don't think that as much as I enjoyed Eddie Murphy as a comedian, and I can articulate that I enjoyed him I enjoyed his stand up. I didn't see Eddie Murphy as like a stand up comedian. I saw him as a superstar. I saw him as a
Mhm.
mega star. And so I never really thought like, oh man, if it's not Eddie Murphy, then I can't do it. Because I remember my mom sneaking me into a comedy club when I was like maybe 11 years old, 10 or 11 years old. I remember her
Mhm.
sneaking me into a comedy club, and I saw people and I just thought like, look at this. This is so like, this is a world that I'm completely unfamiliar with.
Mhm.
And then it wasn't until I became an adult. I think that just in my household, a lot of opportunity wasn't presented. And by that, I mean it's the traditional route. You go to school, you graduate, you go to college, you major in something, and you get a job. And I just think it took a bit of my exploration in the world to recognize that no, you don't have to do this one thing or do this thing a certain way. Like
Mhm.
even now, like right before the pandemic, I did like a Conan and Friends show in Chicago for
Mhm.
All-Star Weekend, for NBA All-Star Weekend. And, they gave me like a +1 to everything. And it was like this all-star treatment, and it was amazing.
Mhm.
And I could have brought one of my friends, and they would have had a great time, and we could have like been party girls and whatever, just tore up the city. But instead I brought my youngest brother. And the reason why I brought him is because I wanted him to see all the like different types of opportunity. Like, you don't have to just do like college never lets you know what, and I'm not opposed to college, but like, I think sometimes the world can feel limiting. And if you don't,
Mhm.
if the people that are around you, if the people who are your mentors by default, which happen to usually be people's parents, if they have a
Mhm.
very traditional route in mind, it can really limit you. It takes a lot.
Mhm.
I mean, now we're lucky, we have like the internet, we have so many outlets to the world to see opportunity and possibility. And I just think that especially when you come from a poor state, and like a poor state of being, really
Mhm.
you are just seeking security. And like anything,
Mhm.
about the comedian or the artist is like, it's not secure at all. That's not a secure state of being at all,
Mhm.
financially. And so I just don't
Mhm.
even think my mind went there. I don't think that it was a creative thing. I just think that it was a survival thing,
Mm.
you know?
Mhm. Yeah.
And also, as much as I can talk about Eddie Murphy and whoever, I wasn't seeing many women. I
Mhm.
wasn't seeing many women. I definitely wasn't seeing many black women. And so
Mhm.
it's like there's really no example for me. There's really, and I mean, now that I'm older, there were examples, but I just didn't have access to them.
Mhm. Mhm.
And so therefore it didn't present itself as a viable possibility. But I think the reason why I
Mhm.
moved to LA and thought like, oh, I'm going to act, is because I watched movies and I watched TV
Mhm.
shows. So I knew that acting was a thing, but I didn't
Mhm.
understand how comedy, I don't think I understood the world of comedy. But
Mhm. Mhm.
I mean, now I understand it, you know? Does that
Mhm.
answer your question?
It
Sorry.
yes, it did, yes. Because yeah, I think, we talk a lot on this podcast, like, about representation, of course, given that
Yeah.
we highlight Muslim creatives, and yeah, like what you said just reiterated the fact that that representation is so important in terms of, exposing people who don't normally see themselves represented in acting, in comedy, in music, and et cetera, to kind of see that, like, this is a viable thing for me to do. Like, if I work hard and I have the talent, like, this is, a viable career option for
Yeah.
me.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think too, like, recently on a lot of episodes we've also been talking about, like, the different layers. And so it's almost like, especially because we talk mostly about Muslim representation, but I know you yourself experience a lot of intersectionalities, so I'll touch on those. But like, with Muslim representation specifically, like, there's kind of that first iteration of, like, just having a Muslim around, either in the writer's room or
Mhm.
like on the show. And like, that's like almost like the baseline. And then it's like,
Mhm.
now that that's more common, it's like, okay, now we can kind of go into like making those Muslim characters actually like whole and complex and flawed people. And that's like the next step. And like, and then it's like representation from, yeah, like the different intersectionalities. So like different bodies, sizes, and abilities, and skin colors and ethnicities, and like, and then kind of showing. And it's almost like those are like the stages of how it seems to go.
Mhm.
And I know that like you've been on the comedy scene kind of like you were there before this more recent exposure that we all now have, where there are several Muslim comedians, but also like actors and people in Hollywood, for example, that people can name now. But they do still
Mhm.
tend to be men, and they do still tend to be like Arab or South Asian men.
Yeah,
So can you
definitely.
talk more about your experience, like as a Black Muslim woman in comedy, before like Muslims in comedy was like a big thing, like kind of it is now, where it's more recognized, like there's more representation.
Yeah, I mean, I actually don't even think I need to, because it's still non-existent for me, in terms of
Mhm.
like, you don't. I mean, show me a black Muslim woman on
Mhm.
TV, and everybody's going to point you to me.
Mm.
You know, if you say
Mhm.
a black Muslim comedian, a black female Muslim comedian, they're
Mhm.
most likely going to point you to me. You know,
Mhm.
Um, so I do think that, like, yes, as you said, representation is important and everybody's stories are important and diversity is important. But I think in the world of Islam specifically, in the world of Muslim representation, I do think that the Muslim that is not the Arab or South Asian Muslim is not represented at all, really. I mean, right now, what they show Mahershala Ali, like,
Mhm.
and like Dave Chappelle
Mhm.
talks about being Muslim, and it's very interesting. I was actually at the Hollywood Bowl, at a Dave Chappelle showed a recent documentary that I believe that he's working on selling, and so
Mhm.
I had the pleasure of talking to him briefly, and he was like, "Yeah, Zainab, he was like, I've been watching your sets." And he said, "I had no idea that you were Muslim." He said, "I just found out that you were Muslim." And then he gave me the greetings, and I gave the greetings back to him. And he was
Mhm.
like, "Yeah, you were born, like, you were raised Muslim, like born and raised Muslim." And I was like, "Yeah." And he was like, "Wow, that's so," and like for him, that was like, not comedy was a point of connection for him. Like the deeper point of connection for him with me was
Mm.
that I was this Muslim woman,
Mhm.
um,
Mhm.
and I think the reason that is because media plays a really big part in the representation of everybody. But we all
Mhm.
know that the media, who controls the media, is not representative of everybody. So the
Mhm.
story is going
Mhm.
to always be told incorrectly, which means that the people whose stories it is has to work harder to
Mhm.
make sure that the stories are told correctly, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
But I think that in order for that to happen, then within the Muslim community, whether it be the Muslim entertainment community, the Muslim community as a whole, there has to be more openness, acceptance, and intersectionality. You know what I'm saying? Like,
Mhm.
I could talk to you about the TV and film, but that's just a symptom of what exists. It's like, I think that I think that people believe that if you're black and Muslim, that you're automatically, like, aligned with, like, Farrakhan. And there's nothing wrong with that,
Mhm.
or you're
Mhm.
automatically like a nation of Islam, which presents as something that is not quite Muslim. And I think that's also like a conversation that's very present, and it happens in, in just amongst, like, your personal life being Muslims. I was dating a Muslim man who was from Africa, and he was like, "Are you Muslim?" And I'm like, "Yeah." And he was like, "But, like, are you a real Muslim?"
Mm.
Or do you,
Mhm.
like, or are you like a black Muslim? And I was like, I think even that
Mm.
question or that assumption is offensive, so I think it
Mhm.
starts with conversations amongst ourselves, in the work that we're
Mhm.
doing amongst ourselves. The show that you're saying that everybody had the pleasure of seeing me on, the I Heart Halal, I was really afraid to do that show because that audience
Mhm.
is a majority Arab and South Asian audience. The
Mhm.
comics on it are all men for the most part,
Mhm.
right? And all of those men are either Arab or South Asian or Egyptian, or
Mhm.
whatever, And so everybody, even if they're not, this is a very interesting this is a very interesting thing to me. Even
Mhm.
if they're not a practicing Muslim, where
Mhm.
they connect with a Muslim audience is they're culturally Muslim.
Mhm.
Does that make sense?
Yeah,
I,
100%.
I, my faith is of Islam, but my culture is
Mhm.
Black culture, which is
Mhm.
very different from Arab culture, which is essentially Muslim culture. Does that make
Mhm.
sense? So when I get up on stage, while I am Muslim, my perspective is always speaking from a Black American experience.
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
but most other Muslims are speaking from an immigrant experience.
Mhm. Mhm. Mhm.
It's
Yeah.
just very different. And so I was afraid to do that show because I'm
Mhm.
like, these people culturally aren't going to connect with me, you know?
Mhm.
And I don't want to, it's like, not only are they culturally going to not connect with me, but I'm also like, I am a proud Muslim woman who's also not going to cover up. I'm not going to wear hijab. I'm not going to. And so, what, maybe that's another level of disconnection for them, you
Mm.
know?
Mhm.
Um, and so I was
Yeah.
afraid, but then I
Yeah.
was quite phenomenal, if I
You
do say
were,
so
honestly,
myself.
like, it was, and I think, like, truly, like, you were so incredibly hilarious, and I think, like, as a woman, seeing you up there was, like, just amazing because I was like, "She's, like, so funny," and she is Muslim, but that's not what the comedy is about, and it's almost like
Yeah,
when you kind of when you hear the dumb people out there who are criticizing female comedians and saying, women aren't funny and the only things they talk about are like this and this and this. It's only like women issues and like they can't be funny about anything else and stuff like that. And it's like I think that it's such like a really wonderful, again, part of representation to see somebody who's like they're funny but they're not funny because they're Muslim, or like you're not funny because of this thing. Like it helps to kind of shape your worldview and what you end up sharing with the audience, and as you said, like the way that you're able to connect with them. But that's not like your only identifier. Like there's
yeah,
layers to people, and I think that's a really nice uh part of, yeah, of representation of what you were talking about how like it's it's such a different thing to kind of be, yeah, like not as represented even in the Muslim circles,
yeah,
and then
yeah.
have you kind of go up there and kill it. It was very awesome to watch.
Thank you very much. And I realized with those shows, like I did Wallahi, She's Funny, I'm actually doing
Mhm.
another tour with ill Muslims called I think it's called Punchlines. We're actually in Chicago. I don't know when this comes out, but I'm in Chicago this weekend. Um,
Mhm.
and um, what's beautiful about it is it allows me to lean into a part of my life and upbringing that would take a bit more of explaining to do in a regular comedy audience, like, how
Mhm.
like
Mhm.
in a if a Latinx person is performing in front of an audience full of Latinx people, then they can go from English to Spanish, Spanish to English, Spanglish, and there's no
Mhm.
explanation.
Mhm. Mhm.
So with me in front of I'll just say a Muslim X audience, right?
Mhm.
Then I'm able to sort of like speak to them how I speak in my house. Like a lot of my life has been like a slight translation. I do not speak Arabic, but I speak like uh I grew up with Arabic, but I
Mhm.
I can't translate.
Mhm.
I do my prayers in Arabic, but I don't speak Arabic, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
So, but there's certain things that you just grow up in a Muslim house. Like there's just certain things where you are using the Arabic translation. You're never using the English. I never blessed my food without saying Bismillah. I've never done that.
Mhm. Mhm.
Until I
Mhm.
started eating with other people. And now I let the majority of non-Muslims do what they're do. And then my Bismillah is just silent for me,
Mhm.
you know?
Right.
And so what happens when I perform in front of like a majority Muslim audience is I get to go in and out of like, I get to use, I guess, Arabic colloquialisms, if that makes
Mhm.
sense,
Mhm.
you know,
Yeah. Yeah.
and without any explanation of it, like
Mhm.
there's
Yeah, without
something this
needing to.
yeah, like I feel like I'm always like torn between two worlds. Like, yeah, my parents are Muslim, I was born Muslim, but my grandparents, my aunts and uncles, my extended family are not Muslim at all. They are deep down like Southern Baptist Christians, you know?
Mm.
And so
Mhm.
like that experience, like my grandmother buying me a Barbie every Christmas and a white Barbie at that, it's like it's
Mm.
twofold. It's like you not seeing me culturally or religiously, you're not really respecting what's happening. And
Mm.
so for
Mhm.
me to like be able to get up on stage in front of Muslims and let them know how, I could be in full hijab and my grandmother find it completely offensive. And then when I'm uncovered up and I go into a mosque and all the sisters are thinking I'm taking shahada, and me not having to explain that. You get what I'm saying?
Mhm. Mhm.
Me just delivering that and them getting it, right?
Yeah.
Versus if I'm
Yeah.
at like a regular comedy club, if I said shahada,
Mhm.
now I got to go into a TED talk or what? Now I got to
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah, they get a Muslim
So
education with the side of
yeah,
comedy. Yeah.
yeah. And I do find that like Muslim comedians talk a lot about being Muslim, you
Mhm.
know? And I think that I do talk about it sometimes, and I'm very I am Muslim. I am a proud Muslim, but in my day to day, like I feel like we all have a human experience, you
Mhm.
know.
Mhm.
So I'm not gonna get up on stage and tell you about 9/11
Mhm.
just because I'm Muslim. Although I lived through
Mhm.
that. I was a kid in
Mhm.
New York. I was in
Yeah.
math class when it happened that morning, you know? I
Mhm.
have an entire experience and a story that's directly related to that. I felt afraid and fearful of being attacked because on the news they said that Muslims were bad, Muslims were bad, Muslims are bad.
Mhm.
And so every time I walked into a space thinking that I would be attacked as a Muslim, and then realized they didn't see me as Muslim, they saw me as black. You know,
Mhm.
and like
Mhm.
that at that moment was my safety. You
Mm.
know, like for the first
Mhm.
time ever in life.
Yeah.
It's like, but I don't get on stage with that. I don't know. That's never the starting point of my comedy, you know. But
Mhm. Mhm.
if I get on stage and I start to talk about sex or I don't know, like things like that where I know, like I tell a joke about like not drinking, right?
Mhm.
I rarely tell the audience why I don't drink, but I
Mm.
know why I don't drink.
Mhm.
But the joke is not about me being Muslim. The joke is about somebody trying to roofie me, you know?
Oh
But,
god. Right.
you know,
Mhm.
but, but the reason that I don't drink is directly related to my faith,
Mhm.
a
Mhm.
direct result of my faith. But
Right.
I don't know. I just think that it's I think it's great when people can be funny and talk about their faith, but I also just I don't know. I'm not just Muslim, I'm not just a woman, I'm not just black, I'm not just American. I'm like all of these things. And like my
Yeah.
comedy is a constant reflection of all of those things, sometimes more of one thing than others, but you know,
Mhm.
that's just who I am. And so
Mhm.
my comedy is like the living experience of all of those things.
Right. Yeah. No, that's amazing. And I think like when you've talked about like how you're kind of worried, for example, at I Heart Halal, and like sometimes if you're in front of Muslim audiences, um, is there like a censorship that you do, or are you just like, nope, like this, as you said, like I am all of these things at once, and this is my experience, and I'm still Muslim, and so I'm just gonna say it, or is there like a level of stuff that you hold back in those situations?
Yeah, there's definitely a level of things that I hold back. Like, and I do cross the line with I Heart Halal. Like, I do cross the line a little bit. I do cross the line a little bit, and then I let them know just to keep them safe. I'll say astaghfirullah. Like I'll say astaghfirullah before you need to say it, so I know that So I know that you ain't messing. I know
Right.
that that I know you ain't messing with this.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
that in and of itself relaxes them. Like okay,
Yeah.
okay, she's not
Yeah.
trying to sully us. It's like no, I'm not trying.
Mhm.
But I am a professional.
Mhm.
And so in the same way that if a college hires me and says, we need you to work clean, I would work clean. I'm doing
Mhm.
the same. I
Mhm.
have the same. I have respect for the audience. It's like
Mhm.
I'm not gonna go if I go into your house and you want me to take off my shoes, I'm gonna take off my shoes. So if I
Mhm.
know that I'm in front of a mostly Muslim audience, then
Mhm.
I am going to I'm not going to do something different from me, but I am going
Mhm.
to tap more into that part of me that services
Mhm.
this scenario, you know?
Yeah.
Um, and not that I'm a big F-bomb thrower on stage or, a super, super like uh what is it? Like I'm not really my material is never super rated R, you know?
Mhm. Mhm.
Um, but I'm also not here to do what's been done. And so if
Mhm.
I feel like there's a conversation that I need to have with a Muslim audience, then I'm going to have it. I'm going to try and
Mhm.
be as humorous as possible. But like,
Mhm.
I used to say on stage, like, yeah, stop, it's just like, stop being ridiculous. Where am I supposed to meet this Muslim man? At the masjid? You're in front of me. He's in front of me. How will he ever see me? You know what I'm saying? Like, at
Yeah.
least like that's like true to me. Like I don't like let's have this conversation. You know, it's like
Yeah.
there's these unrealistic barriers and restraints and responsibility put on women specifically. So
Mhm.
I'm not gonna not say that on stage. You
Mhm.
know,
Mhm.
but
Yeah.
but if I have like a nice vaginal joke that works at a comedy club at midnight, am I going to take that to a I Heart Halal show? No, I'm not.
Right.
You know,
Probably
just
probably a wise choice.
yeah, just like I wouldn't take it to my mom. It's like
Mhm.
it's the
Mhm.
difference. It's like I might run something past my sister, but I'm not going to run that
Mhm.
same thing past my mother. You know?
Right. Yeah. Yeah, yeah. No, I love the idea of kind of, as long as your comedy, like as long as you are in a respect relationship with the audience and vice versa, then yeah, like say
Yeah,
say whatever you want. That's awesome. So
yeah.
that's kind of in regards to when you're in front of Muslim audiences. So when you're in front of non-Muslim audiences, like do you feel like at all ever in your career there's ever been any pressure as like a representation of like Muslim women or black women that's like been where you felt kind of like either a pressure or like a fear of like doing like messing up or saying the wrong thing or doing the wrong thing or anything like that?
Um, I think yeah, I think I've had like a few times I felt like the need to be like more conservative than not, like in conservative an attempt to be like a good representation of like a woman, a black woman, a Muslim woman. But then I realized like I am a lot of who I am on stage, off stage.
Mm-hmm.
And I had to ask myself if I believe I am a good representative of those things when I go to the grocery store, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And if I think that I'm a good representation of those things when I go to the grocery store, then I don't have to edit or limit myself on stage because I'll also be
Mm-hmm.
a good representation. Like I don't have to think about that. Like, do I think about that when I'm running errands? No. So I shouldn't think about
Mm-hmm.
that when I'm on stage,
Mm-hmm.
you know?
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
very I'm very I'm very aware and mindful when I'm in a room, like what the audience is feeling and stuff like that. I can feel when they're uncomfortable. I can feel when they really like me or don't like me. I can feel like those things. I can feel when they don't understand. Um and it's like that's the job, navigating that. But I'm never
Mm-hmm.
not going to say something because I think for a long time I even shied away from talking about like the issues that women, especially like young women and really like in the pursuit of love, like things that we are navigating in this world. I think
Mm-hmm.
that I shied
Mm-hmm.
away from that being like, trying to represent like a respectful woman. And it's like, no, like the other day, right? The other day I was on stage at the improv and I would never call myself like a physical comic, but I
Mm-hmm.
had just went to the OBGYN and I was talking about my experience at the OBGYN, right? And how my doctor had did something very small and I thought that it was like, wow, that's so considerate of her to do, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then it hit me like, oh my God, like in a couple of years, like it's gonna be that time where I'm at the age where I'm gonna have to get a mammogram, like, and then I was
Mm-hmm.
and I and it I'm deathly afraid of mammograms because I'm such a small chested woman. And just the contraption for a mammogram seems like it does not work for small chested. So I'm on stage saying, I hope that technology advances enough by the time I am of the age to need a mammogram. And so at the improv, there's a piano on stage, there's a stool on stage. So I go to the piano and I use the top of the piano almost like it's a mammogram. And I'm like physically trying to, like, physically showing the audience like the task that it is going to take to check my breast out, you know? And like I had so much fun living through that, you know? And I think that maybe a couple of years ago in my comedy, I probably would not have done that, because it would have been as simple. It would have been a thought of me like, oh no, but that's a joke about breasts, but it's actually not, you know?
Yeah.
So
Yeah. It's a very real experience that every breast having person will need to go through in their life. Yeah.
exactly.
Totally. Yeah. No,
Yeah.
and I love that. I think that's why you're so able to connect with your audiences and stuff, and with young women, and especially I'm sure young Black women, because you are so authentic in your storytelling and in comedy. And is that something that like you kind of are your is your comedy usually full of stories? Because like I know that you went actually, and I'm not sure if this was while you were doing open mics and stuff or just before you did any comedy, but you actually took a comedy class.
Mhm.
And I think a lot of people that we've interviewed comics on the podcast mostly talk about how they just kind of like did open mics and stuff, and like some of them did
Mhm.
improv classes and stuff, but I don't think we've heard of anybody really doing like a comedy specific class. So like, what was that like? Did you learn things that helped? Did it help shape your comedy in any way?
No, not really, but I definitely did that while I was doing open mics, and what it did provide, what the class provided, was a group of people that held you accountable and went to open mics with you. And so I think
Mm,
open mics can be a very scary thing. And so there was
mhm,
this now, and open mics can be hard to get up on. And so it's like all the other people in the class, it's like we would all be at different open mics signing each other up, or you would have like, you know, three people that you would be like, okay, we're going to it was just like a help, it was like helpful to get you out there. You get what I'm saying? Like if it's
mhm,
like if today I was afraid or lazy or anything, it's like I'm still going to show up because three other people are counting on me. I'm the person that
mhm,
has to sign. Yeah, you know. So that's what the class did for me, or that's how the
mm.
class serviced me at that time. Um,
Right.
and what was the other part of the
Just
question?
if there was anything that you learned in those classes that like has maybe shaped your comedy or not so much.
No, and I don't want to take anything away from the class, but I think that it was I think that that's just what it was. It gave me like a I don't actually I think I only know one other person. She's an actress actually, who was in the class with me. And
Mm,
I've taken improv classes and sketch classes and all of that, but yeah, no, I just think that it was nice to have, like, it really felt like I had a group of friends that were also um uh on a particular journey. And I doubt that,
mhm,
I imagine that none of them are still on the journey. You know,
mhm.
maybe I'm like the last of the Mohicans, if you can still say that, from that particular group. But yeah,
Mhm,
it was just nice to have some companions. That's what I got
mhm.
from the class. Yeah.
Yeah. And do you feel like now that you're kind of like where you are in your career, like very successful and kind of like doing more different types of projects, is that like comedy community still really important? Or as you kind of move up in the career, is it more like isolating because of your success?
No, I think the comedy community is always so important. Everything that I've gotten, it's been like because of comedy. Like
Mhm.
I think that every opportunity that most opportunities that I've had, it's because somebody saw me on stage. And the way that you get
Mm,
on stage most times are comics recommend you. Like comics, it's
mhm,
like a word of mouth thing. People either think you're funny, like working with you, like, you know, like think that you're professional, all of those things. And I think that the comedy community, I think it's beautiful. It's beautiful.
mhm,
It's twisted, but it's beautiful.
mhm,
And I
mhm,
don't think that, I mean, I like going to work. It's like yesterday I worked on a TV set, and
Mhm.
then at night I went and did a comedy set, and
Mhm.
just sitting talking to like comedians at the end of the show, that was like that was like that was like a perfect end to my night last
Mhm.
night, you know? Just like
Mhm.
sitting out there and just freaking talking to comics. And our conversation went like all over the place. And then like the ridiculous fans that come up that are super drunk after the show and they're trying to, it's like, and it's like, it wasn't a huge show. It's like nobody did well. Like we all bombed for the most part. But that's like the fun time, and like and then we have these
Mhm.
like funny stupid conversations, and then these deep introspective conversations. And no,
Mhm.
I mean, I hope to never be isolated from the comedy community, and
Mhm.
from
Mhm.
like my peers and the people that like really keep me grounded, comedians or not. I don't want any level of success to um cloud or remove the people who have serviced me, in the ways that I needed for this long, through the journey. Like, I don't know it. I think that's when you watch comedians, when they're disconnected, they feel disconnected when you watch them,
Mhm.
you
Mhm.
know? And I never want to lose the connection.
Yeah. Yeah, that's fair. That's very, very cool. And so you have like several projects going on. And so I have two questions about that. Number one is like, how do you find balance? Because you're doing comedy, you're acting on a show called Upload, and you have, all these other things. Like, how does that all fit into your life? Kind of like, how do you balance that all?
Um, hmm. I think that it's always a game of like 0 to 60,
Mm,
like I feel like my life is always like, ugh, I have so much time to like I have no time. And that can go
mhm,
from like day to day, or that can be like months at a time where it's like, oh my God, I haven't had a true sleep in like months.
mm, mhm,
Um,
mhm,
but I think that I like functioning like this.
mm,
I think that I mean, you do have to find a balance. You do have to rest. But I think that I have like little things that always um, keep me kind of like present and grounded and like feeling like I'm gonna be okay. Like I get up and run in the morning.
mm,
That's
mhm,
like a thing that I do for me, for nobody else. I don't
mm.
care what's happening. I make time for it. If I have to be somewhere at 6 o'clock in the morning, that means I have to wake up at 4 o'clock in the morning and run, like, and I
Wow.
don't complain
Mhm,
about it. I don't, because it's for me. It's not for anybody
mhm,
else. It's the thing
mhm,
that says if you do this for you, everything else is going to work itself out. And I
mm,
think that in finding a balance, I think typically you just have to always be able to carve out those little things that keep you balanced. And that's like
mhm,
one thing that keeps me balanced. As much as like I can be exhausted and stuff like that, it's still like getting on stage for some reason is a release for me. So
mm,
it kind of adds to the balance. It
mhm,
was
mhm,
it was a bit hard during the pandemic when there was nowhere to perform,
mhm,
because I had so much to release and nowhere to release it. And I know now I'm so grateful because I'm like a working comedian and like working still during like a current pandemic. Like I can get up at all the major clubs in the major cities. And like a
mhm,
lot of people don't have that. A lot of comedians don't have that. Like, and I
mhm,
and I just imagine I know comedians who have so they've gone through so their life has changed so drastically in 2 years, and they really need a
mhm,
stage to like get it off on, and they don't have a stage.
mhm,
And
mhm,
so because of that, I'm one, very mindful and grateful, but two, I don't like to waste my time on stage either. It's like
mhm,
I try to get up there most times intentionally, with
mhm,
like this is the work that I'm trying to do tonight, and hopefully I get it done,
mhm, mhm.
you know?
And so, like, with that general wellness kind of that you're trying to ensure that you have in your life. Like you mentioned earlier in the conversation that like laughter is very therapeutic, and that's kind of something that
Yeah,
you like to share. So is it something like, is your comedy something that you use as therapy for yourself? Ever?
absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. To like talk out your thoughts to freaking
Mm-hmm.
strangers, and then for
Mm-hmm.
you to find some sort of humor in it, and then for them to
Mm-hmm.
agree, yeah, there's humor in that. And like, oh yeah, girl, I went through the same thing, or I'm going through the same thing, or when you said this thing, it made me feel so like, yeah, it's like not only am I
Mm-hmm.
helping myself sometimes, but I'm also helping somebody else sometimes, you know? Like,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I have been getting when I get off stage these days, I have been getting like really large compliments from like all different types of people, like their appreciation for what I'm doing up there. And it really it's 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 comforting for me as well, because it feels like there's something really um magical was uh how do I exchanged, you know?
Mm-hmm.
It feels like, oh man, I just really enjoyed that. And they really enjoyed it too.
Mm-hmm.
Wow, that felt so good, you know?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I don't just say stuff to say it. So it's like I have to process. I have to process my life. I have to process information. I have to process relationships. I have to process circumstances. So I'm constantly figuring out how I feel about stuff. And that in and of
Mm-hmm.
itself is like therapy. My comedy is all about me. So that means I'm constantly holding myself and my life under a magnifying glass, you
Mm-hmm.
know? And so that in and of itself is like therapy. Is it the totality of therapy? No. Some of us really
Mm-hmm.
need to see a professional,
Yep. I'm with you
but
there. Yeah.
but part of it, yeah, part of it is very much cathartic, you
Mm-hmm.
know?
And is it
Yeah.
hard being vulnerable ever in those situations? Like, are there topics
Yeah.
you would never talk about on stage?
No, I don't think so, but I think there has to be an established trust with the audience, like
Mhm, mhm,
it's like the moment I see a camera come out and stuff like that, most comedians that are being like really vulnerable and not just on like cruise control with these like funny topical jokes about things, but like we're really sharing our lives. The
mhm,
moment that camera comes out, it immediately makes you go like, ugh,
mm.
uh, like
Yeah.
it immediately makes you want to put that wall back up. I understand
Mhm,
now why the comedians who are big, like the Dave Chappelles, like the Kevin Harts, have the luxury of like having people lock their phones up,
mhm,
because it's like, yeah, there's no, you can take anything. And I'm doing a joke right now, and I remember I was at this club, and as I'm doing it, this woman in the front row, she takes her phone out, she starts taping me, and I'm like, you got to stop taping me. And she, was apologetic, and she stops, and I do the joke, and it gets a like really big laugh. And then I say after the punchline, I'm like, you see why I can't let you tape that? I was like, because
mhm,
if you share that out of context at all,
mm,
it's not comedy. Out of context,
mhm,
it's not comedy,
mm,
you know?
mhm.
And I
Right.
can't trust that you're not going to share it outside of its context.
Mhm, mhm,
So I'd appreciate it if you just sit here and have this exchange with me and we keep it here.
mhm,
Also
mhm.
like you paid to see me. Let somebody else pay to see me,
Yeah. Yeah.
you know?
Yeah, yeah, and I think that's totally fair that, like, you kind of need to maintain a certain sense of control about, like, how your words, if they do leave the stage without you, like, how they're used and perceived
Yeah.
and stuff. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
But I am quite vulnerable. And so if ever
Mhm,
I'm like editing or something like that, it's because while I'm vulnerable, a lot of times my stories involve other people. And so I have
mhm,
to, sometimes it's about protecting the innocent.
mhm,
So it's like, yeah,
mhm,
I'm sharing my story, and part of my story is their story, but would they want this part of their story to be shared? And so then I have to do a bit of writing, or have that's when sort of like that's when the writer in me comes in and says, okay, I want to tell my story, but I also want to protect their integrity within this story. So
Mhm.
how do I do that, you know?
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, fair enough. So I know that we're kind of getting close to our time. So
Hmm.
I don't know if you have like a few more minutes. What we usually like to end with is a rapid fire question situation. So it's just like five
Okay.
questions and it's like the first thing that comes into your head and then we'll kind of wrap it up because I know you have places to be. Um
Okay.
so the first one is what's a movie or TV show that traumatized you as a child?
A movie or TV show that traumatized me as a child. Probably The Wizard of Oz. I was really afraid of witches
Mm,
after The Wizard of Oz. Yeah, after seeing The
mm,
Wizard of Oz. Yeah. I just thought
mhm.
that all
That's fair.
witches were green and had like a long pointy nose and rode in on a broom. Yeah, definitely
Mhm.
Wizard of Oz.
And then did you ever see, Wicked or anything to, like, allay your concerns?
I definitely did. I was in London. I saw Wicked on I saw Wicked the play. I saw it
Mhm.
in London, and it was phenomenal. It was
Yeah.
phenomenal, and it released any fear or anything negative that I had associated with witches. It released it. Hmm.
That's good, that's good. Okay, number 2 is your most regrettable purchase.
My most regrettable purchase, probably like a pair of Gucci sneakers.
Fair
Only
enough.
because, yeah, like they were like heavy, like they felt like bricks every time I like wore them. They were like, it was like having ankle weights on, and it was just like, I mean, I don't know, but I believe that like just off the top of my head, I'm sure like some just like chunky, big goofy Gucci sneaker. It's ugh.
But did you have the most toned calves because of that after you wore them?
I didn't even wear them that much. It's like I wore them a few times and we're like, I gotta let these go. This is like sneakers, the whole purpose of a sneaker specifically is for comfort. And so if you
Mhm.
are walking in a sneaker that's not comfortable, it's like you doing yourself such a disservice.
Truly, truly, why would you make it uncomfortable if you like, on purpose? Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, next question is the most expensive thing you've ever broken.
Ooh, the most expensive thing I've ever broken. I don't know. I broke my mom's mirror one time. I'm not sure if it was expensive, but I
Ooh.
know I threw a tantrum. I was a kid and I used to throw tantrums. And this was the last tantrum I threw. Um, and I was like a young teenager, like maybe around 14 or something. And my mom did something that I didn't like or didn't let me do something or go somewhere. And I threw a tantrum and I broke this beautiful mirror that she had. She had just gotten it,
Mm,
and it was this like beautiful mahogany wood, and it's this large mirror, and I just broke it. And the look, she was like, "You are all." She was like, "Look at you throwing like still throwing tantrums," and she looked so disappointed in me. She
mm,
looked like she was so like disappointed. I just was
mhm.
like, "Okay, I got to stop."
You gotta grow up now, yeah. Yeah, that parental disappointment is the scariest. It's worse it's scarier than the
I was
anger
like,
for sure.
yeah, I'm like, okay, this is enough. This is
Yeah.
enough.
Fair enough. The next is the strangest place you've ever performed.
At a strip club in Detroit, um, it was very early in my career. It was off of the sixth block, off of the Sixth Mile, which I hear is
Mhm.
like, the worst place. I don't know. I
Mhm.
hope people in Detroit don't be offended by that. That's just what I heard. But it was a late rainy night, and the guy who told me to come do the show, he did not tell me that I was coming to a strip club. It wasn't until I walked in that I'm like, oh, this is a legit strip club. I stood next to a stripper pole as I delivered my comedy, but it ended up being a really fun show. But that was
Nice.
definitely the weirdest place that I have
Mhm.
performed.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and then the last question is your favorite way to eat potatoes. So
Favorite
fries,
way,
specific type of
yeah.
fries.
Favorite way to eat potatoes are French fries. I love French fries. I actually eat them more often than probably I eat any. Only thing I probably eat more often than French fries is are probably salad, and I usually eat
Mm.
those in like I usually eat the
Together?
salad to be healthy, yeah, and eat the fries to get
Mm.
full. Um,
Yeah.
but and my favorite type of fry, I mean, I really love a waffle fry, but I don't really
Mm-hmm.
like coated fries. I just really like a fresh potato that's
Mm-hmm.
fried at a temperature that allows it to be crispy on the outside and like, soft on the inside.
Mm-hmm.
I don't really
Mm-hmm.
like when they start putting stuff on fries. Like I don't ever
Yeah.
need my I don't like soggy fries. I don't want chili on my fries. I don't want cheese on my fries. I just want
Mm-hmm.
piping hot, crispy fries and some ketchup to dip it in.
Mm-hmm.
That's it.
Nice. Ah, sounds delicious.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you so, so, so much. We actually are very excited that you will be joining us for our festival this year, which will be held
Yeah.
on March 12th. So we're very, very stoked that you will be there with us. And so where else can people check out your comedy and all your projects?
On all social media platforms, it's Zainab Johnson, Zainab Johnson. On TikTok, it's the Zainab Johnson,
Mm-hmm.
Zainab Johnson. And of course, they can check out my website. They can YouTube me. Everything is Zainab Johnson. Just like the best way to connect with me is via social media, mostly Instagram. And yeah, and then that will just branch out. You'll any other way you want to find me. That's a good starting point.
Awesome. Okay. Well,
Yeah.
thank you so much for giving us your time today. This was a wonderful conversation, and we'll look forward to seeing you in person in March.
Yay, I look forward to it as well. Thank you for having me.
Thank you.
We hope you enjoyed today's episode of The Halal Gap. Stay tuned for more episodes. The Halal Gap is a Mosquers production. You can find us on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and TikTok by searching Mosquers Film Festival. Thank you to our sound and video editor, Arish Jamil, our tile artist, Narmeen Syed, and our producer, Asif Qureshi. Please rate us on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. And if you're watching on YouTube, please like and subscribe. If you have any questions or comments about our podcast, you can email asif@themosquers.com. On behalf of Sophia and myself, thanks for joining, and we'll catch you next time.